Are there any other things that people should avoid, or like common gotchas? Like, I think being an agency, one of the really great things about being an agency is we see lots of data, we see lots of different businesses, we get under the hood on so many different accounts in different circumstances and scenarios that is, there's so many learnings just from that alone. So what do you think are some of the gotchas that people should avoid if they're planning to scale over the next 12 months?
I think a big one is having targets and key KPIs that are only in platform.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
when you're reporting back your amazing scaling efforts and you're saying, we increased revenue by this much, we had this many more customers come in, this many more people taking the action, if that's not actually reflective in the bottom line of the business, you're not going to get sign off to keep scaling.
Yeah.
So yes, it's important to look at in-platform data, but every platform is going to big themselves up in some way by their attribution model.
Yeah. I think if you go and take a listen to the first episode in the Scale Up series with Jack Hayes from Pooch and he was talking about managing your marketing investment and growth from the P&L and actually looking at the margin on the business, using the platform metrics as an indicator, but always coming back to the profit and loss, which is
so critical.
Really cool episode. I think there's an interesting point here about making a decision. It's almost one of the first decisions I think you have to make as a business when you're planning to scale. And that is, do you want to scale profitably, or are you willing to take a hit to reach a critical mass?
Yeah.
And I'm sure loads of business, of course we want to scale profitably, but actually it's very difficult if you're, scaling up at pace for every new customer acquisition to be profitable on the first purchase. Mm-hmm. So are you considering things like lifetime value and calculating that into your ROAS thresholds? Are you looking at long-term lifetime margin? Or is it very much about that first purchase has to break even, or that first purchase has to be profitable? And it sounds so obvious, but it's a really interesting and important discussion to have before you scale.
It's obvious, but it gets missed really often because you don't get
Sure it is.
the right people in the room to have that conversation.
Yeah. And that I think is where expectations can get misaligned really quickly and frustrations can kick in very, very quickly, because if one team's going, well, we're just going to push as hard as we can, and the other team's expecting something slightly different, or another department or the finance department, whatever, it's just never going to happen, never going to work.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think when we were looking through the prep for this, you mentioned getting your ducks in a row, which I think is part of that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting the right people in the room and getting everybody on board with what your goals are for scaling.
Are there any other gotchas you think that things that we've seen that have held accounts back from scaling, and based on being in the trenches a little bit, what we would recommend people try and avoid?
Creative lag. A massive, massive one is creative lag.
Yep. As in not having enough creative quickly enough to test and roll out.
Yeah, exactly. So people want to scale accounts 100%, but not having the creative resource to be agile when things start to fatigue and not do well, or not having a bank of creatives to come back to refresh the account and breathe life into it.
Yep.
So often, you can have customer data, you can have that you're kind of feeding back into how you're approaching ads, and you think you've got the perfect formula for the perfect ad that's going to do great, and it flops. And you need to be able to be flexible and quite quick in that turnaround for creative. And if you aren't, it can lead to some less than great results.
It's a very good point, because that, being able to be reactive and being able to move things forward really quickly is a big part of this. Particularly with paid social, creative is one of the biggest levers we've got, right? So being able to make that happen is important. However, in a scale-up business and a business that's growing quickly, if that business has the luxury of an in-house creative team, usually they're getting pulled in lots of different directions. They're not
yes.
just like a paid social creative team. So they're doing the paid social creative, the organic social creative, the website creative, all the other marketing material and everything else. And you're right. Sometimes you get to this point where there's a backlog and you just can't get what you need quickly enough. And that, you're right, that really does slow stuff down.
Yeah, and you're right. It's hugely important on paid social especially. But if we're looking at Google, the importance of creative on Performance Max campaigns can't be kind of understated either.
Yep.
Updating based on seasonality, keeping that
Yep.
keeping that refreshed is super important.
Yeah, landing pages,
Yeah.
like it feeds into everything really, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any other blockers that we come up against? I'm trying to, creative definitely, like blockers to scale.
Conversion rates on websites.
Yeah.
That not being considered.
Yeah,
It's kind of coming back to the kind of first points we were making around if you're just looking in platform, you're missing a trick. You need to be taking in the kind of the wider ecosystem that your ad sits in. And if it's going through to a landing page that's not converting, it doesn't matter how good your ad is.
definitely.
And
It's
that takes time. Landing page development takes time. So that needs to be considered before you start scaling,
yeah,
because it's going to feel a bit like a rapid rush to get it sorted out.
yep,
If you're in the middle of your scaling period trying to figure out what landing pages you should have.
yeah. I think if you're looking at if your conversion rate is low and you're trying to scale, you have to sort that first, because otherwise you're just hoping for like a random miracle to come in and take over and everything to be great, and that's not how you scale.
You're putting a plaster on a broken leg.
Yeah.
It's not going to do much.
Yeah, exactly. So like you have to address that, because if you want to scale, you have to have a strong conversion rate, a strong average order value. Everything in that sequence has to be spot on,
Yeah.
and you can't scale a leaky bucket, can you?
No.
So to wrap up our short and sweet episode about scaling and blockers and advice, what if you if someone knocked on the door and said, Abby, give me your one biggest piece of advice about scaling my ad account, what would that be?
I have to pick one.
You can have two.
I think it's coming back to understanding what you're trying to achieve. Like you were saying, it's all well and good to say in platform we're going to scale and we're going to have a ROAS of this, but does it actually reflect what you're trying to do as a business? Does that actually reflect the bottom line?
Yeah.
And to that, that is so critical. And I think I really want to push that home, because that gets missed so often. That conversation, it's like, we want to scale, but nobody's really clear on how or why or what we're trying to achieve.
Yep.
And you kind of have different departments wanting different things, and it all just gets really muddy, and nobody's that happy in the end.
Yep.
Right? And the other thing I think, especially for me, is making sure that you aren't trying to fix a leaky bucket. What is it? Fix a leaky bucket? What's the right phrase there?
Fill a leaky bucket.
Fill a leaky bucket. You have to get your conversion rate on your website sorted. You have to understand the journey that people are taking on your site and user experience. Because as good as your ads can be, if you don't have your bestsellers in stock and you don't have a good solid conversion rate on your landing pages and all of these other aspects that mean success in your paid media, then it's not going to work.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. The only thing I would add to that is being realistic.
Yes.
Because if you're going, we want to scale to this size and we want to do it on this ridiculously low CPA and high ROAS at the same time, it might be possible, but it probably won't. So pick realistic targets within it. Otherwise, you'll run for 2 weeks, you'll run for a month or 2 months, whatever. You're not going to hit the goals. Everyone's going to be disappointed, and it will all just fall apart. So be realistic would be.
I think we've
My advice.
we've shocked some people that have come to us when we've come back to them and gone, that's not realistic.
Yeah.
But it's so much better to have that conversation at the start
100%.
and get everybody's expectations aligned. And really, if you're working with a paid media agency, they shouldn't be afraid to say, guys, that's not feasible.
Yeah.
Like, let's look at this in a different way.
Yeah, have a little think.
Yeah, and that's not being pessimistic.
No.
But if you are, trying to achieve these kind of things that are never going to happen, it's only going to leave everybody disappointed
No one's
and
gonna
frustrated by it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, Abby. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks to everyone for listening in, and we shall see you next time.